I feel like there's some awesome news for the future of Flare, and let me explain why, even though nothing I say is financial advice. Not too long ago, on June 11th, it was announced that on X, at least from the Flare Networks account, it did say that NASDAQ-listed Vivo Power is deploying $100 million in XRP on Flare Networks, which I think, of course, in theory, is very amazing because Ripple, aka XRP, very massive, right? But even besides that point, quite essentially, it does summarize it a little bit in the later part of the post, and it says that Ripple and XRP Ledger built the entire enterprise-grade foundation. Flare now adds the DeFi layer. Now, DeFi, of course, stands for decentralized finance, and I do like this because if we take a look at the decentralized finance market, it is predicted to be worth over $200 billion by 2030, according to Grandview Research. So again, when people like to say, oh, DeFi is over and all this type of stuff, well, I disagree, actually. I think better days could very well be ahead. It's just the markets aren't doing the best as of right now, but I think moving forward, maybe it could be a different case. But even besides that, we also take a look at, basically, it kind of summarizes at the bottom, and it says, institutional XRP hits DeFi. So again, I think this right here is just good overall when it comes to Flare, because when we think about a Flare, we don't really think about it as like, this hype project that is, kind of doing this and doing that. It's not really doing cool things, right? But then the way I take a look at it is that Flare isn't supposed to be like that. It's a more like utility-driven project. And when they're doing stuff like this really gets me excited because, again, shows that they're doing something. And I feel like the team is actually treating this as a full-time thing, if that makes sense. Because sometimes I see other projects out there, they update whenever they want to, they do this whenever they want to, and it just kind of feels like they either just, again, do things whenever they feel like it, or they're doing it when the market is doing good. So then it doesn't have that kind of feeling where they treat it seriously. But then when it comes to Flare, I feel like it has the vibe where it just feels a little bit more serious to me. You know what I mean? And when I think about a project that could very well survive for the long term, even though there's no guarantees, I like that sort of vibe. Something that is more serious, something that's taken more as a meaningful thing, as opposed to just, if it does good, okay. If it doesn't, whatever. It doesn't feel like that to me. But even besides that, if we take a look at Flare, and more specifically, we take a look at its native token called FLR, is 25 cents hypothetically something that it could very well reach during a fully fledged board? Now, that wouldn't surprise me whatsoever because if I take a look at Flare as a project, I think it's very fantastic. And let me explain why, even though nothing I say is financial advice. If we take a look at Flare, what is it, right? It's the blockchain for data. Now, let me explain a little bit further because it's even been stated that it provides developers with decentralized access to data from other chains and the internet. Now, it's an EVM. EVM, by the way, stands for Ethereum Virtual Machine. However, again, it is an EVM smart contract platform with two data acquisition protocols. Now, the first protocol I want to talk about is something called FTSO. Now, FTSO stands for Flare Time Series Oracle. Now, why is this a big deal? It's because I think the Oracle aspect of it really is something very amazing. Because if we take a look at what is an Oracle, right? An Oracle is basically a data feed that brings data from off the chain, aka off-chain data, and brings that data over into the blockchain. Now, why is this necessary? It's because without this off-chain data, basically, a lot of decentralized applications out there, they can't function properly. So, of course, I think oracles do, really matter, especially in this space. And if we see other projects out there that are like very centered around oracles, I think, there are very popular ones. Like, for instance, I think a lot of people know Chainlink. I'm very bullish on Chainlink. But even besides that, there's also something that's not as well known, but it's also very popular. It's something called Pyth, like the Pyth network. It's spelled like Pyth, like kind of like Python, but then minus the on, if that makes sense. But yeah, besides that point, I think this is very interesting because it's even been stated that FTSO, it's focused on decentralized prices. And again, this does offer decentralized price and data feeds to decentralized applications on a Flare. So I think that's pretty awesome. Now that we've got FTSO out of the way, which is the first data acquisition protocol, I want to talk about the second one, and that is something called the data connector. Now, the data connector, basically, allegedly, what it does is that it is used for trustless data proofs. Now, this enables information from other blockchains and the internet to be used on Flare. So I think that's really interesting. Maybe not as cool as FTSO, but you know what? I think it's still pretty, integral to the project nonetheless, so I want to talk about it. Now, let's also take into consideration, right? Currently, giants like Anchor and Google Cloud, they're in the Flare ecosystem, again, allegedly. So when I take a look at something like this is something that I think is very impressive because I think large entities, they don't really want to be a part of an ecosystem, especially for a project that is kind of like, bad, I would say, right? But then I don't think Flare is bad. I think the fact that it's even able to achieve what it's already been able to, I think is a big testament because if we take a look at FLR, it's not like it's a super massive project or something like that. Some people think it's kind of medium sized or whatever, but I think that really for what it already is, it's achieved pretty fantastic things nonetheless in theory. Now, if we take a look at the idea 25 cents, right, go into that price, it's around a 13x from here. Now, market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply would be around $17 billion. Why don't I think this is too much to ask for? It's because when I take a look at that market cap, first of all, around, again, 17 billion, for instance, right, you've seen like Dogecoin exceed over $80 billion in market cap, and that was years ago, back in 2021. And I get it. The markets, generally speaking, aren't doing the best, many people would say. But then at the same time, we have to take a look at how the factors when it comes to, I just say, the crypto space, I think is actually a lot more bullish than back then. Now, let me explain why. Back in the peak of the 2021 bull run, around 300 million crypto owners. Now we have over 600 million, according to Crypto.com research. Also, take a look at, the Bitcoin ETF, the Ethereum ETF, and of course, hype regarding Ethereum, I think is going to be very beneficial for these type of projects that have the EVM aspect in a sense, which again, Flare basically kind of has that. I think in the world of just cryptos in general, this blockchain space, I think if we view it in a vacuum, I think the factors are actually looking very bullish in terms of that, right? But then of course, all these bullish factors wouldn't really mean much if the market overall isn't doing the best. So then in my opinion, if let's say the markets do good, let's say hypothetically again, which I believe it could very well do that because historically speaking, we've seen the S&P 500, it's been through its up and downs, but generally it does have a recovery maybe eventually. So then that's why I'm still optimistic. And I think the factors that we're seeing as of right now, again, if the markets do good again, I think it could be very well a huge catalyst for maybe what we could very well see as a fully fledged type of altcoin season. However, again, who knows, only time will tell, but that is just kind of the vibe that I'm kind of getting from this, even though I can't tell the future. But at least we can take a look into the past, right? And I think make things a little bit more interesting and just kind of take a look at what has happened again, historically speaking. Take a look at how, again, based off history, usually altcoins as a worst case scenario, they typically peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. Now, again, that's just the worst case. So even if, let's say, the markets are doing very fantastic, maybe as of right now even wouldn't be a time where altcoins could very well peak as a worst case scenario based off history. You know what I mean? So I don't see why, the altcoin season is over. I just don't think it is maybe the case, which is why I'm still staying patient. Now, will that October date be exactly correct? Who knows? Because that's based off history. But then in my opinion, I'm still going to pay attention nonetheless. And I just kind of feel like, there's only one thing I can control, which is just myself. And that's dollar cost averaging, accumulating, holding, and just waiting. That's it. And make sure to subscribe if you gain value from this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's only the captain, and I'll catch you all in the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.